Начинается наша секция, это русскоязычная секция,
We
но
start our section in Russian, but at the same time, as Mr. Diklev mentioned, we have simultaneous interpretation into English. So the first speaker is Maria Sergeyevna.
почему-то ее нет в
I
роли,
see that she is not
поэтому переходим к
Oh,
here,
she,
so
she's
we
here.
move on to the second
Да,
speaker.
прошу
No, no, no. She's here. I
Sorry,
guess she's here.
she's here.
Мария
Yeah, I
Сергеевна,
guess Maria, right? Maria
да,
is
Мария
Maria.
Сергеевна,
Maria Sergeyevna.
она доктор исторических наук, главный
She
советник
is a
департамента
doctor of
стратегического
history.
планирования
She's counselor
Министерства
to
иностранных
the Strategic
Российской
Planning Department of the
Федерации,
Ministry of Foreign Affairs, professor,
прикладного
chair of
анализа международных
applied
проблем
international
имеет Россия,
problems analysis of
имеет опыт
Kimo
работы
University in the Ministry of Foreign
в
Affairs of Russia. She also
представительстве Российской
works
Федерации при ООН
uh,
и международных
in Russian's representative branch in
организациях
the United
в
Nations and
Женеве.
other
Также
organizations
хотел
in
отдельно отметить,
Geneva.
что
Also, I would like to especially note that
ее докторскую диссертацию, которая
her doctor's thesis that
1000
consists
страниц
of
и посвящена
more than
сирийскому
600,000 pages and is dedicated to the Syrian
рекомендуем своим
crisis.
студентам
We very
приобрести
often recommend it to our students
дипломных
when they work on their
работ.
thesis, diplomas, and
Прошу вас.
Спасибо большое.
so.
Выступление на русском, правильно?
Thank you very much. I'll be speaking in Russian. Yes, yes, we have a Russian
Добрый
language
вечер, коллеги.
session.
Большое спасибо.
Thank you very much. Good evening, colleagues.
Предоставили
Good evening. Thank you very
возможность.
much
Я
for giving me the opportunity
хотела
to
бы
speak.
поговорить
I would like
о
to,
засечь,
yes, I would like to
о
speak
роли ООН в
a little bit
урегулировании
about the
региональных
role of United
конфликтов,
Nations in
в
resolving
частности,
regional
Ближнем Востоке, в
conflicts,
частности,
in
если вы не
particular in the
возражаете,
Middle East, particularly if you
если
don't
можно
mind.
поговорить о
I'll
Сирии,
mostly speak about
так сказать,
Syria
каждый кулик в
because
своем болоте будет разбираться
we all speak
индивидуально,
about
но
our
сделаю
field
несколько
of expertise is normal, but I'll make also some
конкретных
references
ситуаций.
to
Но
other
прежде
crises
всего,
and
когда мы
conflicts.
говорим о
And
роли ООН,
first and
мы
foremost, when we speak about the
должны
role of United
понимать,
Nations,
что такое
we need to
ООН
understand
сейчас,
what
что
is
такое ООН
United
в
Nations
нынешнее
and
время.
what is United
ООН
Nations at the current moment.
это такой вот
United Nations
дракон о двух головах.
is a two-headed dragon,
Первая
and
голова
first
о двух головах, первая голова
head
это
is
секретариат, и
the
вторая голова
secretary,
это
and
страны-члены.
the second head is the member countries.
Не
And
нужно
we need not
забывать
to
тем,
confuse them. We need not to mix
если
them,
хотите, о
and
некой такой генерической
we need to
структуре,
speak about
какой-то иллюзорной структуре,
uh,
которая, так сказать,
some elusive
играет в качестве
entity
игрока. Это
that
вот
acts as a player. No, it's not
секретариат
there.
ООН,
There is a
и
secretariat of the
секретариат,
United
я имею в
Nations,
виду как
and by that I
секретариат,
mean
который возглавляет генсекретарь
secretariat that's
по
handled by Secretary General and Deputy in
политвопросам,
peacekeeping
гуманитарным и
and
так далее.
humanitarian issues
И
and others,
секретариат
and the
многочисленных, ну, по
secretariat
крайней мере, в дипломатических наших
who
кругах,
we in our diplomatic
секретариат,
circles, the
секретариатом именуем
secretariat
также и
of the United Nations, we also name it
различные агентства и структуры ООН.
by we also name
Первая
numerous
структура
agencies
это
and structures of the United
государства-члены,
Nations. The second
которые
thing are the
образуют
member
некую
countries
композицию
that
политическую
create a certain kind of political
своего участия
composition
своего в ООН и в работе ООН
as a result of the participation in the United
И
Nations,
это дает
and
представление о,
it
вот как я сказала,
gives the
политической
idea
композиции
about
по
the
тому
political
или иному случаю.
composition for various
Так, применительно к
political
Сирии,
stories. And if
то
we
сейчас, кстати,
apply this to
стоит
Syria,
отметить,
and
что
now
он
I would like to
подвергается
note
активной
that
критике
it is
как
subject
с
to
российской
active
стороны, как
criticism
с
from
экспертного
the Russian
сообщества.
side, also from the side of the expert community,
Эта критика,
and
конечно,
from the
отчасти
diplomatic side. And
справедливая.
criticism is
Безусловно, он сейчас
grounded
не может не
and
быть затронут
justified
и
in a way.
внешнеполитическим
And
кризисом,
it also has to touch on the
которого
topic of the
мы
overall political
являемся.
crisis to which we're all witness.
Справедливости ради хочу
And
отметить, что в сирийском
I would like to
конфликте,
say that in the
урегулировании
Syrian
сирийского
conflict
конфликта
and resolution of the Syrian
ООН пытается
conflict,
сыграть свою роль,
United Nations tried to
говоря
play
об
its own
ООН,
role.
имея в
And
виду
here, when I
секретариат.
say
И
United Nations, I mean the
те
Secretariat of
структуры,
the United Nations and the agencies and
которые под
structures
руководством ООН
that
функционируют. Вот приведу
where they
несколько примеров,
function. So I'll give
чтобы сравнить
several
не географически, а
examples.
функционально. Первая
And
попытка ООН сыграть какую-либо роль в сирийском
they played
конфликте
some
была
roles.
предпринята в 2012,
And
если не ошибаюсь, память года,
in
в
2012, in
2012-2013,
2012,
когда
2013,
была создана миссия по наблюдению в Сирии,
there was a mission on monitoring in Syria. It was led by Norwegian General Robert North. The mission, it will all happen before the existence and
то есть в начале кризиса. И он действительно, вот эта миссия, она собирала
this
довольно
mission,
много
and
информации
it
о
gathered a lot
достижениях
of
режима прекращения боевых действий, в том числе боевиков, группировок боевиков.
it gives
И
lots
именно
of
поэтому оппоненты
foundations.
этого
So that's why I don't have a lot of
конфликта,
time
говорится,
to
именно
speak
поэтому
about it for a lot. That is
наши
why
англосаксонские бывшие союзники,
our
США и
former
Великобритания
Anglo-Saxon
не
partners,
дали продлить срок этой
England
миссии
and
Совета
United
Безопасности
States, they're not allowed to prolong the mandate of this mission. So this mission became
Затем
uncomfortable for them, and
ООН сыграла такую чисто декоративную
it
роль
all
в
played
том,
its
чтобы
decorative
оказать
role,
легитимизации
and the
российско-американской
victimization
договоренности по вывозу и уничтожению
on
сирийского химического
taking on
оружия
and
в
get
2013
rid of
году,
Syrian
подписав
nuclear weapons in
договоренность,
2013, a very
которая,
important
ну, как некоторые
negotiation, a
исследователи
very important
считают,
treaty that
предотвратила
some of
военную
the
эскалацию, потому как
academics
русские,
note as
связанную с
escalation around Syria that's tied
одобрили
to
впервые
the
в
use,
Сирии
back then for
химическое
the
оружие.
first time, the use of chemical weapons there in
Затем,
Syria,
да,
and
и Совет
then
Безопасности выполнил
the
свою
Security
делегированную функцию,
Council
просто
still played its
ну,
decorative role,
легитимизировали, утвердили эту договоренность, но
claiming and
тем не
approving
менее
these
символизм
negotiations.
в этом
But
определенный
the
есть, потому
symbolism
что
is
это
it
были
was still
ратификация
there,
договоренности
and
и легитимизация или
the
подтверждение
legitimization
переподтверждение
and
Советом Безопасности давала
approval and the
определенный
further reapproval by the Security Council
Затем
had
следующая такая большая
compulsory
вещь,
nature. Then the
к
next big,
сожалению, у меня
very
мало
important
времени,
feat. I don't have
на
lots
двух
of
основных вехах,
time for my
это следующий
presentation,
этап,
so I
это,
just
конечно, начало
rush in all the key
следующего
highlights. The next
этапа
stage
цепочки
is
российских
the
вето,
chain of the
которая
Russian
сейчас
vetoes,
опять
and
в ходе вот
now
этого
within
российской
this
инвазии Запада
anti-terrorist
наши
struggle,
оппоненты
our
начали
opponents
вот этими
actively
вето
keep on remembering to us
ООН
this
по сирийскому
series of
проектам
vetos to the United Nations
антисирийской
Security
резолюции,
Council for
но
draft projects of
вы понимаете,
anti-Syrian
тогда
resolutions. But
все эти
you have to
проекты
understand that
резолюций,
back
их
then,
было
all those
довольно
projects and
много,
resolutions,
они
I
действительно
would summarize
были,
them. There were lots of them.
эти
They were
резолюции были
all
заточены на то, чтобы
they all had anti-government character, and they were all
военно-политическими и
done and drafted
экономическими
so that through
способами
various political and
они
military
научной
means
горьким образом
to
резолюции 19
strangle us
апреля, когда
elements,
была
and
провозглашена безопасность
Russia,
военных
having
фаз,
learned the
когда
experience of Libya when the no-fly zone was called on, and then NATO was participating, actually defending itself by this decision, taking part in Libyan events on the side of Libyan terrorists. Having this experience, Russia had no temptations in order to act with any level of flexibility. And after a series of Russian vetoes regarding the draft resolution project, what started the next vector was the operation of the military forces of Russia that is fundamental and that changed its composition, oversaw the situation, and then also speaking with a simple language, it changed situation on the battlefield. And by the end of 2016, terrorists, there were no breakthrough achieved, and uh, this is the moment, end of 2016, which signified the beginning of the negotiation process between Russia and the US. So the Americans said all these years were not interested in negotiations with Russia. They suddenly started to show up when it was clear that supported by them forces started to lose. They offered us to start negotiations on not doing this escalation. Still, Russian US worked in 2016, working with the following solutions, actively joining to the Security Council, and back then, what started was the active negotiation process under the guidance of the United Nations. And here we have this moment. Yes, I have 4 minutes left. So here we see this moment, which is a very fine one, and in Geneva, under the guidance of the Special Envoy of Secretary General of the United Nations for Syria, it was taken back then. It was in the 7th of Stir, now it's Gil Peterson. more than 10 years, for example, 14 ranks, 14 more than 10 rounds of steering negotiations under the guidance of the United Nations. These were political negotiations and the spectrum of opposition with facilitations and under the guidance of the United Nations. And uh, it has been going on for some time, and the break for results and some breakthrough happened with the creation of the Constitution Committee that now continues its operation, continued it in Geneva, but taking into account the anti-Russian position of the Switzerland authorities and government and Burns swaying away from neutral status. Now we're thinking of where to shift this committee, but now this Constitution Committee, if we keep the details and concentrate on the main thing, was created by the decision of Astana. Former Russia, Turkey, and Iran agreed on the establishment of this committee that will operate under the guidance of the United Nations. So here it acted as the follower, as the guided one, as the player who uh, works as at the second phase, and it confirms and the proof that the world is moving on to a situation where it will be, of course, mm, will be uh, ready, work will be ready to implement some bilateral or multilateral solutions. It will make them provisional. It might facilitate or mediate, but to a very limited extent, because in regional conflicts, sides and parties, especially the sides that oppose the government, usually are fragmented and depend on many external sponsors, and accordingly, it having limited capacity and limited opportunities at the same time, having especially excuse me for my rendition, having the opportunities to reach some external sponsors, it might play some supportive role if we rush across other sides and aspects of United Nations activities. So I'll outline the human rights protection and humanitarian one. First of all, the first one, the former is the United Nations Human Rights Council and the Commission for Investigation in Syria. The Human Rights Council is a highly politicized body that, for a long time, from my point of view, has no relation to human rights, and I can speak about this with high degree of confidence because we've been doing this for many years in Geneva. It's a platform for taking heat against the counterfeit that you don't like, and global south and globally started protests about it, but no critical mass has been reached. Regarding the Commission on Investigation, there was an interesting mm, case. This investigation committee for Libya that was created in 2011 by the United Nations Human Rights Council. It operated until Muammar Gaddafi was killed and Libyan state was crumbled, and then the need for it subsided. So mm, they worked on it, and uh, now they're not there, even if it, even if they did not think about it, still their actions had no practical effect. Uh, Regarding characteristics, it's very interesting because it was also created for disinformation, blitzkrieg, to gather compromise information on government and national law, but because the conflict went on for long, Russia also took part in its operation. And also the mandate of the mission was extended, and Russian other governments, Syrian government and Iranian government and governments of other states mm, started to support the commission with a load of materials on the crimes of the terrorists to change the tonality of the operation of the commission because it could no longer ignore this information, and also it revealed this work into the direction of not the initial customers. So the commission started eating on its children.
On children, so to say. So it's quite an interesting situation there. Regarding the humanitarian aspect of the issue, I apologize, you have 1 minute left. So regarding the humanitarian aspect, humanitarian agency can show their best work. Yeah. In essence, to put it briefly, the humanitarian agency, especially the coordination committee, was used to support the opposing forces to gather information and to help the combatants, insurgents, and mostly in critical situations, especially if we're talking about the blocked regions. So I'll end on that, and if you have any questions or comments, you're welcome. Yes, thank you so much. Dear colleagues, do you have any questions? Oh, yes. Boris Vasilyevich, yes, please do take the floor.
Спасибо большое
Thank you so much
за ваше
for your
выступление.
presentation. I have the same question that I already asked one of our speakers. What do you think about the proposal to reform UN? Do you think that if the Security Council would feature different members like India, Turkey, and some Latin American states, and it will improve UN capacity for peacekeeping and conflict resolution? Thank you so much. Yes, that's the most relevant question that a lot of people are struggling with, and I can only express my personal point of view. Reformation of the UN, in my opinion, not only has to do with the Security Council, of course, but we have to start this conversation with the Security Council. I personally think that such players as India, Brazil, Turkey, as you mentioned, it's not a fact that they'll correct the work of the Security Council in our favor, but I'm sure there'll be some corrections to that, at least a little bit more plurality. As far as all of this whole system, I think it's reform, even though it will take place, it will take years, and we're not going to be able to handle it alone without our partners in the developing world, without China and other friends of ours and partners, because we're talking about the deep ideological and staff reformation of the UN, because in ideological terms, the Secretariat, if you look at the vice chairmen in political questions, it's American, humanitarian issues, it's British, and French person on the peace speaking. And once again, in my personal opinion, without a deep reform in the terms of HR, achieving any significant progress or at least movement in our favor, it's not something to be hoped for. But these deep reforms will take years, and it's not a fact that it will be successful then, because the Saxon world and the Western world are quite interested in keeping UN serving as an instrument in promoting their interests. So one more question. Unfortunately, I don't see the last name. It's much from Mary. What are the key achievements in UN on the Syrian conflict? Well, when it comes to achievements, briefly, it's legitimization of the results of the Russo-American negotiations on ceasefire, and its legitimization on the Astana format achievements, because of most of the decisions of the Astana format were approved by the UN Security Council, and also and that's perhaps and also has to do with moderation of the Constitution Committee performance. Though there are some questions regarding that, but since we don't have much time to discuss, it's now going to speak here. But let's perhaps talk about it briefly. But generally, I'm quite skeptical about the role of the UN, but maybe it's some sort of a coordination platform. Thank you so much for your presentation. So let us move on. Our next speaker, Belgov Boris Vasilyevich, leading academic scholars in Eastern Studies with the Russian Academy of Sciences. Boris Vasilyevich also has experience in various Arab countries. Boris Vasilyevich, the floor is yours. Yes, thank you so much. My presentation is called Modern Conflicts in the Near East and the Peacebuilding of International Organizations for Regulation of such. First of all, I'd like to say that the cause of the contemporary conflicts in the Near East, it's quite a number of both internal and external factors. And with most prevailing external factors, specifically the influence of foreign factors that are actually used given conflicts to promote their own foreign policy interests. For example, let me uh, speak of a few most significant conflicts that take place in the Near East. The Syrian conflict. It was spoken of in quite detail here, and I'll touch upon it then. The Syrian conflict has been going on since 2011, and it's a clear indicator of this external intervention influence. So there are internal situations in the country, in Syria, despite the problems, did not have was not of this crisis character. It is confirmed by the data by the International Currency Foundation and works by research that have shown the Syrian economy as being local. Some local protests were used by external actors, like USA and their allies, including Turkey, Israel, and some Arab countries, with the creation of Islamic opposition, with thousands of foreign fighters. So this opposition was supported in order to remove Assad and to serve their foreign their interests, which created the creation of terrorist organizations. At this time, radical Islamic forces, mostly with support from Russia, are mostly suppressed. Nonetheless, there are still armed formations from US and Turkey in Syria. I've visited Syria a number of times ever since the start of the conflict in 2011. The last time I was in Syria in 2021, monitoring presidential elections in Syria. So our Syrian colleagues used to say that so this presence of armed formations, foreign armed formations from the US and Turkey are the key obstacles to the regulation of the Syrian conflict. It's a living country, also in 2011. I'll start in 2011. It's also an example of foreign intervention. Prior to the conflict, Libya, one of the more better developed countries in terms of local Arab countries, with some local protests, leading NATO countries and a number of Arab countries in order to remove Gaddafi regime, conducted a direct military intervention with the help of Islamic radicalists. As a result, the Libyan state was destroyed. It sunk into chaos of civil war, where two forces were fought for power, supported by various foreign actors. Despite the formation of the government, of the national unity government, August 22nd, another conflict took on a new turn between between the two prime ministers, Abdel Hamid and Yunus, which led to armed conflict between the forces and their followers. So the conflict is going on. So next, the Yemen conflict. It's one of the poorest Arab countries. It has more of a lengthy and complex history, where there's also a great role of foreign factors. A conflict between Houthis movement and the powers became more active in 2011, 2012. There were mass protests against the social economic crisis in the country. As a result, for over 10 years, a new government came. The new government did not manage to improve the social economic situation. The Houthi movement continued and grew in strength, which forced the president in 2015 to flee to Saudi Arabia. They started a coalition with a number of Arab countries in order to bring back President Hadi. In the course of this conflict, there are other countries, there are other forces involved. There's Islamist groups, Al Qaeda, Arabic Peninsula, and the IGIL fighters, ISIS fighters. So the Arab coalition headed by Saudi Arabia, supported by the US, and Houthi movement was supported by Tehran. Yemen is in a state of humanitarian catastrophe in 2022. President Hadi has passed have power to presidential council, which also included the heads, but Houthi did not recognize this organ. And in the summer of 2022, with the mediation of 22, the sides came to an agreement on a ceasefire that is violated, just as support of the coalition or Arab coalition for the yes is continued, in spite of all the statements of its discontinuation. The Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which is the lengthiest conflict that started back in 1947, when by the UN decree, two states were created. So Israel was created in 48, yet a Palestinian state they did not manage to create, and the number of armed conflicts between Arabs and Israel has led to a great number of Palestinian refugees. And Palestine lost some of its territory. Creation of Palestinian organizations fought for the creation of Palestinian state, include by armed means. As a result of number of agreements, there are two enclaves: the Gaza sector, run by Hamas and its allies, that are considered by a number of states as terrorist organizations, and the West Bank of the Jordan River. This ran by democratically elected Palestinian National Administration. Despite the efforts by the UN, the conflict is not still resolved due to both external factors, continuous support by the US for Israeli activities, for whom Israel is the biggest strategic ally, which was stated by practically all leaders of the US, as well as internal factors, lack of unity in Palestinian movement, and conflict between Hamas and the Palestinian National Administration. In conclusion, I would like to note that the international organizations, UN first of all, somehow managed to decrease tension of the conflict and to improve the humanitarian state to a certain degree. Nonetheless, it didn't manage to resolve this conflict. In our opinion, the biggest cause for the situation is the intervention and the influence of the foreign actors, use them for serving their interests, both international and global. It's also necessary to recognize that UN at some point lost its opportunity to be an influential arbiter. Things like US using UN for promoting its interests. And the role of the global policy becomes more and more vital and start countries of the global south. But this situation is about changing. It's something we talked about, and I think these changes in the UN they need to take place. And actually, the role of the UN that we see now, in essence, is a promotion of the interest of the global actors that force their will to UN and some UN members. Unfortunately, it just became a machine for promoting these interests. And increased the role of the countries of the global south and the countries of the Latin America. The decreased role of the US, I would say, in the global politics. But nonetheless, the role of the US undoubtedly is important. And we need to speak of the fact that even in the States, there are some forces, democratic forces that would want to change the situation. As all of these factors, in my opinion, and have their influence, and we'll see reforms and changes for the better. National organizations and the UN, first of all. Thank you so much, dear Boris Vasilievich, for for sticking to our time frame and for a very interesting speech. So we have a question. Elena Mikhailовna, please take the floor. Boris Vasilyevich, thank you so much for your presentation. My question has to do with the role of the international and regional organizations in conflict regulation in the Near East. And in particular, it has to do with the Arab State League. Perhaps everybody talks about the level of efficacy of this organization, but nonetheless, this format unites all of the Arab world. So do you see any way, any light in the end of the tunnel? How can we expect some shifts in the activity of this organization and and see its improved efficacy? Well, thank you so much for the question. Yeah, the Arab State League. I'm not showing too much efficacy. First of all, it has to do with the fact that there's a conflict in the Arab world, that there is no such notion as Arab world. Does not reflect the reality of the moment. Arab countries are separated in terms of their regional interests, political interests, ideological standpoints. There are certain alliances, country alliances. The important question is that Syria is still is not in the Arab State League, even though Syria was one of the states, one of the founding states of the League. So this question is raised now, and I think it will be solved. So all of these issues, of course, decrease the efficiency of this international body. And I think that still Arab countries will be able to find some sort of a consensus and really work out the issues within the Arab State League. But there's another issue, important issue to discuss here. The Arab State League, as it was said here, attempted to solve both the Libyan crisis and the Syrian crisis, but the Libyan conflict, the pressure from the West prevailed, and the proposals by some Arab State League to resolve the Libyan conflict within the framework of the Arab State League without the intervention of other external actors. West, first of all, was not fruitful, once again due to the pressure from the West. Regarding the Syrian conflict, also there is some intervention, so to say, direct intervention in the Syrian conflict, as it was said here in detail. At the very start of the Syrian conflict, when this incident in Raqqa incident, when it comes to Syrian police activities provoked the start of protest movement in Syria, but there are some witness account by journalists from Al Jazeera agency that recognized that right after the beginning of this incident in Raqqa, tens of armed people across the Syrian borders that joined the protesters, and thus fostering this conflict, which was actually was something that was not. That's also an important factor because intervention by internal forces, the West, the activity of Arab League states, and the pressure on the members of the League that sometimes given. Some of the League members try to withstand this pressure, but these factors are an obstacle to the successful functioning of the Arab State League. And once again, I'm quite hopeful that the situation will change. That will change, then the Arab State League will get to say their word. Thank you so much, dear colleagues. Let us move on. Our next speaker, Sarashvili Elena Mikhailovna, assistant lecturer at the Faculty of International Studies. Her name is coaching specialist on Lebanon. Please, the floor is yours. Elena Mikhailovna, thank you so much. Can you share my presentation, please? Yes, sure. Thank you so much. So my speech has to do with peacekeeping in Lebanon, and a small Arab state that is rightfully considered the gate to the Near East. So this, I'll make a slide. I'll say a few words of introduction now. It's in a way, it will provide some background for the peacekeeping operation that I'll be speaking of in more detail. Lebanon track Arab-Israel conflict has its distinctive features. But it was at some point closely linked to the Syrian and the Palestinian presence in this country, and there was a refugee issues, mostly Palestinian issue, and also with the fact that Lebanon uh,
На этом слайде вы как
was
раз видите те операции,
attacked by Israel a number of times. You can see those operations
в отношении Ливана. Это 73-й год, весна молодости, 78-й год.
1973 was the spring of youth. 1970 Litani emphasized this specific operation because after that, because that's when the mission that I'll be speaking of was formed. In 1978, this operation with participation of 25,000 Israeli military with the occupation of the south of Lebanon all the way to the Litani River. And the goal of this operation was to drive Palestinian combatants from Lebanon. Okay, 1982, it's Peace for Galilee, and in the wake of this operation, 1991, Begin, Israeli Prime Minister, presented a plan called Big Pine Trees on the destruction of Palestinian Israeli armed formations in Lebanon. Israel was attempting to create a buffer zone and also strengthen the position of the right Christians in Lebanon and weaken the positions of the Muslims and create conditions for withdrawal of Syrian forces that were brought in June of 1976. The buffer zone was created south of the country, and prior to the year 2000, the south of Lebanon was controlled by Israel and its marionette army under the command of Major Sar Haddad. The next operation in 1993, responsibility, was called 300,000. As a result of this operation, 300,000 Lebanese became refugees. 1996 and then 2006, another operation. It was a full in the 2006. It was a full-scale invasion, Lebanese war that lasted for more than a month. It involved more than 40,000 army troops from the Israeli side. It was Israel fighting Hezbollah troops. This war, just as other wars, other interventions, has brought the Lebanese a lot of suffering and problems. It's a death of civilians, destruction of civilian infrastructure, bridges, roads, airports, power stations, and so forth. So all of that has led to tensions in Lebanon, separation between political forces, especially Herod was concerned with the situation in the south of Lebanon, specifically such moments as southern Lebanon blockade, up to 800,000 population there. It's a periodical closure of ports, it's water problem. Next slide, please. And in course of the occupation of the South Lebanon, Beirut accused Israel of stealing water from South Lebanon sources. So if I have some more time, I'll speak on this slide in more detail on issues that have to do with a small territory. It's called Sheba Farm on the border in Lebanon, Israel, and Golan Heights. But that's if I have any time left. But for now, we'll move on. Next slide, please. So the mission, normalization of Lebanon, Israeli relations, not only had to do with bilateral connections, but also has to do with multilateral contacts, including with the help of multilateral diplomacy. The Security Council that always stood for independence of Lebanon. In 1978, passed a resolution 425 and 426 that called upon Israel to stop military activity and withdraw its forces from Lebanon. And other than that, there was a decision made on creation of temporary forces, the UN in Lebanon, that would start working in March 1978. The mission was called temporary forces, but as I say, nothing is more constant than these temporary. The mission is on for 40 years, still active. Every year it's extended, and it's still called the temporary interim. The mission mandate was corrected a number of times. Well, it's quite understandable because the situation changed in Lebanon, the situation in the region changed, of course, took some corrections required in the mission mandate. So these corrections took place at the end of the Lebanon-Israeli War of 1982, and then in the year 2000, after the withdrawal of Israeli forces from Lebanon, beyond the Blue Line. I'll speak of that later. And then the mandate was expanded once again in August of 2006, based on Security Council resolution 1601, after the war between Israel and Hezbollah. The mission objective included observation of ceasefire, support of Lebanese armed forces in terms of their positioning in the south of Lebanon, providing civilians access to humanitarian help, safe return of their displaced persons, and so forth. And the numbers involved also changed. With the start of the military activities of 2006, the mission was about to be reformed, and then its numbers by the June of 2006, it's only 2,000 members, including Ghana army of France, Italy, China, and some other countries. So, Security Council passed a resolution in accordance to which the numbers of mission increased up to 15,000 people. In 2006, it was 2,000 members, and also it was expanded up to 15,000 people. And the zone was determined by the Tanya River and the Blue Line on the south. The mission headquarters was the city of Nahura. You can see it on the map, but it's very south of Lebanon, the border with Israel. And the mission functions were expanded also. So not only night patrols, it's the creation of observation points observing the Blue Line, it's demining. By the way, that was also quite an important mission. And UNIFIL supports connection with a broad range of subjects on a local, regional, and international level, including the representatives of local authorities, community leaders, religious activists, civil society, and this connection and coordination, including the Lebanese army, and I'll speak of that in more detail shortly, is important for conduction of joint events in the interest of normalization of the situation in the south of Lebanon. In UN documents, and it's a whole number of resolutions that has to do with it. I'm not going to go into them right now, but they were passed in 16, 17, and 19 on Lebanon. They use this term strategic dialogue. So strategic dialogue is a means of boosting support and coordination with the Lebanese armed forces.
Lebanese armed forces strengthening the
strengthening their potential,
accepting in it more
this has to do with taking more responsibility on providing security in the southern part of the country and Lebanon territorial waters. So the idea was, it was a
in the foreseeable future, these are the Lebanese
it is the Lebanese armed forces that are only security providers, sovereignty protectors
of the Lebanon territorial
the problem of sovereignty, the borders between
border between Lebanon and Israel,
both on land and on air, is a very serious issue. Very serious issue
that is
that is solved by the mission.
So this
You can see
blue
the blue
line,
line.
you can see on the slide. This is the line.
blue,
of Lebanese and
it's a
Israeli forces
it's a line,
that was identified
Israeli
by
no,
United
and
Nations expert in
Lebanese. That was
2017,
determined by
along
UN
with
representatives
representatives
together
of
with Lebanon
Lebanon
and
and
Israeli
Israel, and
representatives.
lack of
With no
border.
approved borders,
This is
UN
120
established
kilometer
a
line,
120
this
kilometer
blue
line.
line,
This blue
is
line is 120
120
kilometers,
kilometers, the
and
line of
that's a line of withdrawal for
demarcation of Israel armed
Israeli
forces.
armed forces.
Best, as close
Considered to
as
be the best
demarcation
proposal
line as
for a
possible,
demarcation line for the
reached
peace treaty
by states in
made between states in
2049.
1949.
And in the
In
end
the
of
end of
December
December 2014,
2014,
next slide, please.
we
A
had a
paper was presented by a
presentation
group
of
of
a series of
experts on the
experts
issues of
on the
technologies and
issues
innovations
of
in
innovations and
peacekeeping activity.
actors.
That
So
was the name of the paper.
this was
The name was
name of the
again
talk, the name of the
on the issues of
experts on
technologies and
technologies and
innovations
innovations
in
of
peace
the
in UN
United
peacekeeping
Nations
activity.
peacekeeping. So
And
in
this
this
paper,
talk,
a number
for
of times,
numerous times, there was a reference to
a
the use
reference is made
of
to the use of
this.
unifil
And
experience. For example,
as
in
an
the
example of this mobiles,
mobile devices,
we
it was
agreed
said
that
about the
this
mobile
definition of a
demarcation
mobile
platform developed by the
demarcation
forces
platform
peacekeepers
that allows the
to
peacekeepers uh, the presence of
to
this border distinction sites in
uh,
real. So the
to place border signs
actual
in real
precision is
time.
up to 2
With the
centimeters.
precision of
So
up to 2
take a look
centimeters. You can see
that
these blue things.
blue dots, these blue
Those are the
dots is
markers, so to say,
are markers that mark
that
the
show
border
the
between Lebanon
border
and
between
Israel. Can you put the previous
Lebanon and
slide?
Israel.
And on this, we can see the blue barrels, and this is the blue line, and the system that I mentioned was transferred to other missions of the United Nations. So they consist of the missions of land forces and operative sea groups. So this was deployed in 2015. So this is this is the first Navy armed operation groups that ever took part in peacekeeping missions, and the activities of operative naval forces became an important sign that allowed us to take off to lift the naval blanket of Lebanon. So they're helped by Lebanon army in observing territorial waters of the country, provided safety and also observing the airspace, and along with Lebanon forces can hold in various times. They took on several countries: Germany, Italy, Belgium, starting from February 2011. Following this, operation was done by Brazil. Starting from January 21, was carried out by Germany. Altogether, 15 countries brought its own commitment and efforts into the activities of naval forces, and the composition of this mission is several helicopters, and along with the naval forces, they stopped approximately they also gave it to Lebanon for further research, and this operation is done so that is 16 times more than the space of operation in Lebanon. And one moment, and the explosion in Beirut port in August 2011, it led to the definition is as follows. The definition of naval port is very important for Lebanon because there are also there are no borders, there are no sea borders, there are arguable deposits, and what is the criticism? Criticism of the activities of this mission. There are objective reasons that explain that not always you get to fulfill the ideas that you planned, but I would pay attention in 2 moments. The impossibility to win over Hezbollah just to prevent their actions against Lebanon on the one hand. On the other hand, the helplessness of peacekeepers to stop regular intrusions of Israel to Lebanon airspace. We have all the tracks, but they don't have means to prevent these aggressions. Also, the nature has changed. Hezbollah uses drones, missiles, industrial and other production that allow to strike from a territory that is outside the mandate of naval forces. In May 2021. Georgetown University researchers conducted an interview with citizens and others, and what they paid attention to. Respondents paid attention to recognition faces problems in interpretation, language barrier that lead to delays, and also other problems such as limited mandate of the mission, its temporal character and instability in the region, influx of Syrian refugees, also Syrian conflict also negatively impacted the situation in Lebanon, also the distrust of local citizens to the mission, and lack of this criticism. We can say that the lack of blue helmets on the border between Lebanon and Israel would minimize the possibility of conflict between the two sides. But the importance of presence of in this moment is provided not by the security chapter, but by the opportunity to provide a direct connection channel between Tel Aviv, Beirut, and local centers of power in case of real threat. Also positive moment. Excuse me. Um, we're running out of time. We can have the next slide, please. Only the slide. I will not comment on it. And we see the figures that are characterized by the mission of UNIFIL at the current moment. And unfortunately, there are also sad statistics. And I would advise the latest website. I would also advise if anyone is interested in this problematic, very interesting book, Russian veterans against, and the second author, Itanka, is specializes in the mission on the Middle East. Thank you very much. I instantly have two questions. Please, Igor Valerievich. Thank you very much. Thank you for this very good presentation. Thank you very much for your speech. I have two small questions. First question is, I do evaluate these actions and activities as successful operation, not entirely successful. No, yes, no, but and the question is on the slide where we had the keynotes in the interactions between Lebanon and Israel. 2006, you called the Lebanese war, in 1882, you call the operation of Peace Galileo. Well, the operation Galileo Peace, it was just a name, but in 2006, I call the Lebanese war. It's like that in history because it was a large-scale operation that can indeed be called war. A question to the colleague: Can you briefly? Yes, thank you very much. Both are wars. I just gave the title, name that was given to it by the Israelites. So the war of Galilee. Thank you very much, Irina Mikhailovna, for your speech. I have a question regarding the Hezbollah activities. Can you clarify what you wanted to say when you mentioned activities of Hezbollah against Lebanon? Because it's known that Hezbollah. Sorry, I understood the wrong way. No, 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 it's Israel. So this is the fight. That's that is the conflict that happens between Hezbollah and Israel. It's natural that it's a big part, a serious part of. Uh, yes, thank you very much. But now regarding Hezbollah's actions, we need to understand. So Hezbollah acts from a territory that's not controlled by. So it's done through blue helmets against Israel, and how much the activity of this blue helmets can prevent this conflict, and how Hezbollah reacts to the actions of blue helmets. Well, I'm said that what is the hardships and the shortcomings and the they say that blue helmets can do what's expected from them, and it's also what Hezbollah very often acts on the territory that's not controlled to the blue helmets, and at the current moment we can say that blue helmets can change something, and we need to change the back then we need to bring in some corrections. Thank you, and I see. I also ask to be very brief, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for this presentation.
Спасибо большое за эту презентацию.
This year, some amendments were made to the missions of UNIFIL in Lebanon by adding the paragraph that the UNIFIL forces have the freedom to movement and inspection anywhere beyond the blue line. And as we know, Hezbollah considered that these amendments are an Israeli-American desire. So my question, do you think that the expanding of UNIFIL missions tasks contracts in its peacekeeping mission in this sensitive area? Thank you.
Ну, я подробно не... Спасибо за вопрос, подробно не останавливаюсь.
Thank you very much for this question. I don't stop on it in much detail because in your presentation, you've mentioned about the corrections that were in this, that were made this year. So I'll not stop on this in much detail. Thank you very much, Irina Mikhailovna, Olga Sergeyevna. Also, very briefly, please. Yes, only questions. Here, thank you very much. You mentioned that peacekeepers in Lebanon, they interact with religious communities, with leaders of professional communities. Can you tell about this interaction and how successful is it? Might not mention about some special successes, but we hold various meetings, we discuss various questions, we discuss normalization situation in the south of Lebanon. Here, I would also like to underline, and this is the strength of the mission and some advantages that are that we need to start dialogue with organizations, so with Lebanese society. Thank you very much, Irina Mikhailovna. Dear colleagues, we're moving on. Next speaker is Ruzhov Igor Valerievich, Doctor of History, Professor, Head of Department of History and Russian Policy of International Relationships and World History of the National Research Center, Nizhegorod University. Nina Slobachevsky, please, Igor Valerievich. Big thanks to you. Can you put on the presentation?
Спасибо большое.
Thank you very much. Thank you, dear colleagues. Good day to you. I would like to first of all express big thanks to Svetlana for the opportunity to speak at this traditional seminar that's dedicated to questions of Middle East and peacekeeping in the Middle East. Allow me to present my presentation on the topic that I would voice. It's peacekeeping missions and conflicts in its multitude in Middle East. Dear colleagues, I'll start with, as it seems to me, the modern world, the world of multinational relationships experience serious problems with peacekeeping and peacebuilding. It's very difficult to name a successful peacekeeping mission that that is going through some peacekeeping activities and extinguishing the conflicts in any part of the world, not only in the Middle East. And Middle East is one of the most conflicted regions of the planet. Modern Middle East includes himself situation, Arabian Peninsula state, Egypt, Israel, Jordan, Islamic Republic of Iran, Iraq, Cyprus, Lebanon, other territories, Syria and Turkey. Internal regional architecture in the region creates a unique political reality that's not similar to anything, where we see elements of classical European balance of powers and bipolar conflicts and elements of the New World Order. And then next factors of this region. First of all, the multitude of unresolved conflicts and Palestinian-Israeli conflict and situation in Iraq and around it, and also Arabian Spring and the civil war, this conflict in Syria that's going on, till the various conflicts in Libya and the events that touch on the state and that has a potential for use of nuclear weapons. So the state of Israel is one of the three countries that are said to have nuclear weapons, but they don't state that explicitly. Now, these nuclear programs have all held by Arabian countries and also Islamic republics of Iran, and just recently it was also in Libya that stopped its nuclear program quite a long time ago, and it was in. We've seen these activities, and the second is the location and quite active and big huge activities in terrorist organizations. So thirdly, this is the attractiveness of the region for industry developed countries, first of all for imports of military products, and fourth is a series of states that fund the economy of in Western Europe. Up until recently, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and banks and Western countries held approximately 500 billion USD, and also the place of Islam in the modern world is politicization and strengthening of Muslim world in various parts of the world. Modern situation on the Middle East can be characterized as everyone against everyone is war, everyone against everyone, all-out war. The reasons that have the modern political configuration is in the fact that the region consists of several centers of power, that ideological and political contradictions are so strong that it's very hard for them to coexist at the same time on a non-conflictual basis. That's why on this side the region is in constant tension. Balance is on the edge of war and peace, and also there are other peoples that bring in lots of efforts to sustain the stability in the region and to sustain also the mining of natural resources. So that's why this is permanently sustained and as everyone against everyone. As we've numerously mentioned, even for the longest, for the most difficult conflicts, still this is Palestinian-Israel conflicts that has been going on for 74 years, and now it sees the crossroads of the interests of the main players, the government of Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Israel, and at its first look, the conflict has been long extinguished, and from time to time, it enters into the conflict has changed a lot from the Arab-Israeli conflict. It became a Palestinian-Israel first of all, and the enemy of Israel and the Arabian country here is at the current moment out of actions. It's the leader of the League of Arab States, and it's an internal conflict. And the Arabian Republic is now outside of this organization, and the most important Israel rival now is the one that had no relationships to this conflict, Iran, and support of Iran is done by Lebanon, and now the most important opponent of Israel in political and economical sense, and Israel has been actively working in this Middle Eastern policy. Of course, it has its own interests and on the energy market, and last time it with Lebanon was it came from zone of the came from so it says that it's beneficial for Israel to have its own legislation. Of course, Israel tries to find correlation points with also Saudi Arabia. There are also bright affirmations to this, the declaration of the sign with Bahrain and United Arab Emirates, and that's why Israel supports quite a strategic partner, which is the United States of America. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. Peacekeeping missions in the region are directly linked with the existing conflicts in the region, and the missions can be split into three big groups: missions to support peace, control on the borderlines and ceasefire, stopping the sharp stage the conflict and aligning peacekeeping process and building the peace, the goal of which is to provide for long-term stability. Please, can I have the next slide, please? Peacekeeping in the Middle East is first of all is done first of all by international forces, mostly by the United Nations organizations, and externally regional organizations. This is first of all the League of their States and separate actors. Now, first of all, this is the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Well, I will not stop on the data that's on the most famous peacekeeping missions. We'll know about them a lot. I will just tell about one of them that has been mentioned by the previous speaker in detail. Let's stop on events that are quite fresh on the operation of Saudi Arabia in Bahrain and in Yemen. If I would make a small side note here that whether the missions can be considered peacekeeping ones, first of all, in relationships to Saudi Arabia, of course, yes, they can be called peacekeeping in character. If we rely them to the classic peacekeeping definition, then of course not. These solutions for Saudi Arabia, either external or political moments, first of all, that are related to their visions and policies, and it's also not allowing some internal opinions to be voiced. First of all, in their eastern provinces, state uprising in Bahrain led to the fact that Saudi Arabia, with the support of United Arab Emirates, sent a limited armed contingency to help the Sunni regiment to suppress the Shia majority position. Also, they paid report. They understood that the current event actively used uh, to prevent Bahrain from doing so, and also to helping their fellow Muslims. It's shown also there were some worries that Shia prices can impact negatively the situation in their one of the provinces. And let's note that after the intervention of Saudi to Bahrain, they had to face with a big, more serious problem with the reason of presence of radical movements, radical organizations, and them looking for their spots in their political infrastructure. Let's have the next slide, please. Intervention into the conflict from the side of, first of all, a series of Islamic states. It's March 2015, and Yemen, they have an contingency, and the question of what the people done from the government of Yemen in exile. The mission of Saudi Arabia was inactive, and also some other Arab states participating in it, and they now have the rights to carry out. They think that they are secure the operations in Yemen. The situation in Yemen has negative consequences for Saudi Arabia itself. First of all, it's done in provocations in western provinces of the kingdom, and the conflict between Iran and Tehran, and also partly in Yemen. And also recently we see the trend of some attempts to have negotiation process started. What is the process in peacekeeping? The problems in the modern Middle East, taking into account the large number of actors and participants of this conflict, it's very hard to get to settle them down or to effectively work with peacekeeping missions, to provide efficient participation of those missions in international institutions and conflict resolutions. They need to have a consensus of the most involved actors, and to act with approval. It can bring in lots of weight and authority and bring in more authorities to the region. Now it's not very likely. The existing scheme of interaction between various sectors on the international arena can be shown as a two-level system that lack guaranteed mechanism of impact factors of high level to the lower level actors. The fulfillment of the regional actors by the decisions taken on the regional level still remains a very difficult task. One of the main reasons for this talk redundancy was that the sides could not provide for fulfillment of this by because of the conflict and presence at the current moment, the non-traditional actors having influence and establishing no control to no one, Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic State, and traditional groups of various types of projections and some religious groups. Thank you very much for your attention, dear colleague. Thank you very much, Igor Valerievich. Do we have any questions to our colleague? If we have no questions, then yes, I see one. Boris Vasilievich, please, you have the floor.
Спасибо.
Thank you very much.
Спасибо,
Thank you.
Спасибо большое
Big thanks to you
интересную
for
презентацию.
this interesting
У меня,
presentation. And
ремарки и
I have some
вопрос.
comments I'd like to make and a question.
Ваше такое вот
Your
заявление, что
your
идет
statement
война
that
против
a
всех,
war is
кто
going on,
участвует.
everyone against
Я с
everyone.
этим не совсем согласен.
I
Что значит
the free for all. I don't
everyone?
agree with it. What do you mean the free
Есть
for
более
all?
конкретные
Everyone against
коалиции,
everyone. There are specific form coalitions of Arab
известные.
states.
Есть
They are
группы
known.
сопротивления,
There's also the axis of
возглавляемые Ираном,
By
вторженческие государства.
also the Arab state. Hezbollah, Iraq, Lebanon, to a certain degree. There are regional organizations that are Arab states. So there are certain alliances, Arab states, regional alliances, and to say that there is a war of all against all. That's something that's being used now, but this term, in my opinion, doesn't say anything. If you mean some radical groups, yes, just as well. They're either supported by some external actors, but to say that ever it's all against all, I don't think it's quite correct. And also, you're saying that you have completely uncontrolled movements or groups, Hezbollah, Hamas, and so forth. But if we're to speak of Hamas, it's an organization that elected democratically in the Gaza sector and controls the Gaza sector and its power structure in Gaza district, and it has its own allies. Yes, it's recognized as a terrorist organization by some states, but what do you mean it's uncontrolled by anyone? That's something that requires clarifications. Like I said, Hezbollah is a part of political establishment in Lebanon, and there are Hezbollah representatives in the government and parliament. There are armed forces of Hezbollah that are Iran allies. That's also a known fact. So generally, it's a very interesting presentation, but there are some things that require clarification. That's just some things I'd like to emphasize. Boris Vasilyevich, thank you so much. Well, I'd like to make a clarification here. Make some clarification. Why is the war of all against all? Because let's speak of coalitions. There, they have every member has their own interest, and they not always coincide with the interests of their allies. Let's look at a coordination, the Gulf Coordination Union. The Qatar diplomatic complex has shown that even this organization is not a monolith at the moment when it comes to its activity. The Syrian conflict also has delineated Near East states, separate Near East states. So the four leading states, which is Israel, Turkey, Iran, and Saudi Arabia, they have their own interests that at some stage may intersect. And the key principle in their activity, so who are we friends against? For instance, Israel and Saudi Arabia, yes, they're friends against Iran. Turkey is somewhere near. Turkey is trying to establish relations with Iran, military base and so forth. So this war of all against all, with a presence of non-state actors, like Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and so forth, that are banned in the Russian Federation. It just speaks of the fact that it's not, those are not military conflicts that also still take place, of course, but we're talking about having their own interests that oftentimes oppose the interests of the neighbors. And that leads to conflicts in this war of all against all, in my understanding. This terminology cannot always cover what we want to speak of and what actually happens. But now, looking just as an outsider looking at the region, that is very much loved by me, just as it is by you, Boris Vasilyevich, generally it's kind of picture C. I'm only speaking of the 21st century, of the past 2 years. Not one conflict at the moment is not resolved, unfortunately, till now. We only see the accumulation of these conflicts and them being unsolved. You just give me one more second. And to speak of your second clarification there, aspect covered. We know that first Hezbollah was created in Iran as a part of an Iranian Islam Revolution expert. And say that Hezbollah became a part of this Lebanese establishment. Well, let's look at 2006, the so-called Second Lebanese War, and then I'll argue that so it's Israeli Defense Army against Hezbollah. It wasn't against Lebanon. It was war against Hezbollah. So the Iranian military activity take place between Hezbollah and Israel. It's not Lebanon as state is being fought. Hezbollah, other than that it's a part of the Lebanese state, Hezbollah has its own interests. To speak of Hamas as a resistance movement, well, it's democratically elected, but do you remember what was voted against? It was against Fatah for Hamas, and now it's not. Things are not so good in the Gaza sector, and overall this time, did the life improve there with Hamas? And where is this part of the Palestinian autonomy is moving? It's not quite clear. Just as well as all of the Palestinian autonomy that is now completely illegitimate, especially on the West Bank of Jordan, and any agreements in the near future will be refused by both sides. So, and ISIS is a particular thing that's supported by the US and Saudi Arabia and so forth. But still, they have their own ideas, so their own activity, their own fate, their own interests. ISIS, the recent past, well, yes, of course, no one refused external help, but still, they conduct their own agenda. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Igor Valerievich. Let us go on, dear friends. Please to stick to our time restrictions, both the presentations and after the presentations, and when answering questions. So the next speaker, Olga Sergeyevna, and Lakshana Alexandrovna, her student. Please take the floor. Thanks. Good evening, dear colleagues. I'm about to start, and then I will continue. Since there was a task of providing some sort of an overview of the situation with peacekeeping missions in the Near East, we've tried to do that together with, and I'll start with saying that our region is quite significant from the point of view of peacekeeping, more than peacekeeping, because there were some few first missions there. Well, actually, the first UN mission in history, and the first armed peacekeeping operation with armed contingency, and the first peacekeeping organization with a naval component. And it was mentioned earlier. So it's very these new instruments are often tested in our regions. And it's worth noting that Near East is not the first place, does not take the first place in terms of the number of peacekeeping operations, as may seem with all these conflicts, and it does not go down over the decades. But if you look at the research data that compared the number of peacekeeping operations throughout all the UN peacekeeping activities, the region is in the last place. It's both Africa, maybe for natural reasons, and perhaps maybe there are more states in Africa with then more points of conflict. But also strangely, Europe is ahead as well, and Americas as well. And so the nearest is in the fifth place out of all the regions. You can see on the table here, you can see the dynamics, changes in terms of numbers of peacekeeping operations and the number of conflicts. So the given, this is data from 2015, but since Syria is counted in here, all the, so this data is quite relevant still. So that's first, just commenting on the first point regarding the last place the list. And what's interesting to note is that the region leads, so to say, in terms of the number of long-term peacekeeping operations. It's this is the first operation, the history of peacekeeping had to do with Arab-Israeli or Palestinian-Israeli conflict is still active. The Lebanon mission is still active, even though it's interim, like Igan Mikhailov said. It's been on for 40 years, and it's also not a single president. Missions would take 7 or 10 years, and sometimes they would cease only because the mission was the government, so local governments were no longer happy with it. And for instance, Egypt had insisted on the discontinuation of the operation that was launched during the Six-Day War. So that's a kind of a unusually large number of long-term operations for our region. Most missions have the goal of observation of ceasefire agreements, and Anna will speak of that in more detail. Though in practice, it turns out that the key assistance and the most effective instrument they have is some sort of mediation in communications and interaction of the parties of the conflict, parties of the conflict, starting with some practical moments like humanitarian cargo, of transporting it from one state to the other. And if the sides, and they do feel this way, sides I don't have the desire for instance, to have these trucks being led by the representatives of the enemy state when it comes to cargo that's delivered to Israel, Arab representatives and vice versa, Israeli delivering goods. So in this case, that's when we peacekeepers come in from so-called neutral countries. So it's just some irregular, but yet still very important mediation function. And also, we'll then be speaking of mediations and organizing negotiations in order to create at least some sort of communications between the parties. So it turns out that the declared missions are quite different from what happens when the mission is actually launched. And please do take the floor. Thank you so much. Despite the fact that the missions mostly are will have their general tasks of overseeing ceasefire, there are certain peculiarities and differences. For instance, the ceasefire observation serves as a mediator, also has a mandate to provide military observance in order to form other operations in this region. For instance, at this stage, this organ gives them works with observers for Lebanon observers and on the Golan Heights. Regarding the UN missions in Sahara and Southern Sudan and West Sahara, these missions, other than observing and humanitarian tasks, are also faced with the task of faced with some political issues, either preparation for referendums or control of the tasks of the judiciary of government as in Southern Sudan. And regarding interim military forces in Lebanon, it's worth noting that Security Council has passed a resolution given to jurisdiction to take all those actions within this uh, mission. It's worth noting this mission supports a quite intense level of operative activity that amounts up to more than 13,000 operations a month. And that's why we could say that there's a great number of military involved. But when it comes to completed missions in the region, we could they could be broken down into missions that have the jurisdiction to uh, uh, be part in armed conflicts. It's the UN. Of course, it's done its political tasks, and the rest of the missions uh, are set with the goal of enforcing agreements, ceasefire, and observation. And it's also worth noting that at this stage, researchers pay a lot of attention to the tactics that lead to success or failure of peacekeeping missions. So, in order to develop, to establish these factors, it also takes quite a good deal of work because determining success is not quite a simple process as it may seem at first sight. If we look at the issues of mandate fulfillment, some complexities may arise because oftentimes uh, mandates are opaque and do not set specific tasks and can be subject for discussion. Determining goals can also be quite subjective because, for instance, if we consider uh, keeping life of people the key mission, so it's hard to assess. It's hard to assess success or failure of the mission because if it's one life lost in course of operation, is that a complete failure? And if not, so what number of lost lives would establish success or failure? Definition of success also is also quite complex when we understand uh, that different parties can be interested in a certain mission, and the international community considers mission successful that stops the spread of international conflict, the spread of the international conflict. The local population that remains in the conflict area will not be happy with that, and such concerns are the foundation of the development of a set of success indicators for peacekeeping missions. And in spite of the difficulties, there's a number of approaches on the issue. Uh, uh, in particular, told you wrote a number of for some peacekeeping operations, the criteria that can be used to assess the results and determine two key standards for determining the success: limitation of armed conflicts and fostering the resolution of conflict. Robert Johansson proposed additional criteria: influence on the local population and the degree of violence compared to non-involvement. So on this slide, we have the results of this study done by Ruben Francis in his paper of 1920, where he has conducted analysis of UN peacekeeping operations in the Near East on the following criteria. The first criteria, uh, whether the mission was successful in fulfilling its mandate. The second parameter, whether it served a resolution of the conflict. Most often, if this aspect is served, it shows positive outcome for all the other parameters. Other than that, and there's also a question of how long are the peacekeeping forces are responsible for the completion of the conflict. For instance, the peacekeeping operation in Lebanon has successfully fulfilled its mandate in 1958, but 20 years later, it was forced to come back to Lebanon. So in this case, can we consider this operation successful? So, the discussion continues. The third aspect is uh, uh, imitation. So one of the key motives for the peacekeeping mission is the escalation of conflict. It's quite important to contain it in the geographic terms. And the fourth aspect as a casualty count prior to the operation and after the operation. So if the presence of peacekeepers leads to less casualties, it could be said that the mission is successful. And it's also worth noting here that the majority of operations that are considered failure could be considered as, internal conflicts, because in civil wars and in internal conflicts, oftentimes there are some conflicts and side effects that are not interested in reaching agreements, since as states would be, and such conflicts are lengthy, and the activity of peacekeeping organizations here is quite problematic. And the problems of Middle and East, all this again will continue on the conflicts. So the overview allowed us to make a number of conclusions. Let's give a second, please, regarding what are the issues that arise with peacekeeping in the region. First of all, we have to mention the fact that the society generally is multi-confessional and multi-polyethnic society. Deeply separated communities. So for such complex contingencies that are presented to present citizens from different countries, there are oftentimes difficulties in providing the peacekeepers being impartial. When it comes to, in particular, there are conflicts between the religious conflicts between the representatives of Islam and Christianity, for instance. 1 minute, Olga Sergeyevna. We have to do demographic factors, changes take place, and the communities grow in numbers, different dynamics, and the dynamics changes over time. Makes the situation even more complex. Agreement to the mission is one of the keys. Consent, one of the principles of peacekeeping, and keeps in case of state erosion or presence of a number of governments competing groups who should probably give consent to the mission. In the Near East, the situation is quite typical, where the active regime, where its mandate is not being recognized by. I apologize, Olga again. We're out of time. Can I make a quick comment? I'll just read out 3 points. If you could draw the line, yes. So the engagement of radical terrorist groups brings in a terrorist element in the mission that's often not a part of the mandate. And it was said earlier, as interpretation of mandate can vary for the different parties. That can also lead to violations of the principles of peacekeeping. With the length of the operation has a negative effect on the trust for peacekeeping and creates doubts in efficiency. And other than that, there's also the U.S. factor that oftentimes in their pro-Israel position or something anti-Muslim cause doubts in impartiality of the mission in general. As such, because as we well know, the U.S. plays a very active role in negotiations in the Near East, as well as in peacekeeping missions, which is a threat, as they can actually compete with the UN institutions in this area. Thank you so much. Thank you. Do you have any questions, colleagues?
Если позволите, я бы хотела
Yeah,
небольшой...
allow me, I'd like to just make a little comment. Yes, please, just literally for 1 minute. Thank you so much for your paper. It's very informative. I just want to emphasize one fact. Yeah. Within the UN, there is an XR system. It's complex planning assessment. Planning assessment that actually the first complex tool that allows to provide tethering the situation to the planning, to the results, to the reporting on the peacekeeping activity. So at first it was tested in Minus, and now this planning system, planning and assessment system for the peacekeeping, it's active throughout all of the missions since 2021. It's implemented in all of the missions within the UN peacekeeping system. Thank you so much. So actually, our missions are a bit older, so that's why we're looking for some research approaches to the efficacy assessment, because it's a new, those are new tools, and most missions, especially complete. Yeah, just a side comment. It's not related. Yeah, I understand. I understand. I'm just commenting for our colleagues that it was that the tool instrument didn't use before. Next speaker, thank you so much. Budvetko Sergey Leonidovich, speaker with Institute of International Relations with the Russian State Humanitarian University. Sergey Leonidovich is a practitioner. He knows the region from the inside, and he visited our world a number of times. Sergey Leonidovich, please do take the floor. Thank you so much. The first peacekeeping mission was established right after the first Arab-Israel War. It was May of 1948. It was called UN Organ on the Observation of the Peace Treaty, better known, and so it's the English abbreviation. The headquarters in Jerusalem since 1948. The activity of ANSO it became the first UN peacekeeping operation in the world. Since military observers remain on the Near East. Their objectives are known. It's controlling ceasefire agreements, to be brief, overseeing negotiating and helping other operations, other peacekeeping operations. Though, unfortunately, the presence of peacekeepers in these regions did not stop the following wars. In order to liberate their lands, Syria and Egypt started the war against Israel in October 1973, and only after the end of the October War, the Soviet military observers for the first time joined the US peacekeeping unit. The US observation powers, observers, Andov, were established by the Security Council in May 1974 in accordance to the Resolution 350. That happened after there was a separation between Israeli and Syrian forces at the Golan Heights. Actually, at this time, I worked in Syria as a military interpreter, and I met our observers. But then I was interested in their work, and with the help of the Soviet contingency, the Arab-Israeli conflict was not so violent, and it was noted by many people, including foreigners. The task for the 25 Soviet officers did not involve their objective was helping in the Omega operation and search for the remnants of the military casualties of the war of 1973. The bodies were found. I think it was about 200 Israeli and 300 Arab military men. And also the Soviet mission was a part of the operation that was called Alpha Line. Its objective was to establishing the borders between the buffer zone and Egypt Armed Forces contingency. It's considered that this event became a start of the Soviet peacekeeping, and then Russian peacekeeping in the Near East. I had the opportunity to meet the UN military in later when I was working for the Lithuanian newspaper as a journalist. I became a part of the UN National International Club, including military men from more than 20 countries. And then my new friends told me exactly what tasks the UN peacekeepers were faced with. It's controlling peace treaties, ceasefire, control over security measures, and also conflict resolution in the region. In the Damascus,
тогда составляли русские, американцы и французы. От каждой стороны было по 18 офицеров. Были, конечно, и представители...
Of course, there were representatives from what I remember of Norway, of Sweden, the Dutch, Finnish, Australian, New Zealanders, and in Israel and Egypt, there were also 18 Russian officers, and these groups changed. They rotated every year, but over time I figured out what differed the blue casques, the observers of the United Nations from peacekeeping, of course, and not only the presence of weapons, military observers of the United Nations, there are all military diplomats with good English language that undergo special training in their own country before they're sent to the mission. Our officers told me that in Russia, there are also special courses for training UN observers that teach lots of various fields because the requirements were quite demanding and high. Besides complement of language, you have to have good military training. You have to identify from sound and vision various helicopters, planes, jets, identify the ammunition. So you need to be able to solve a complex of problems and tasks. The most difficult part that they told me was the radio exchange. You need to learn hundreds of acronyms in English language and learn to understand them. When I first heard their talks, it's just in third language. I understood not a word of it, only acronyms. And they all had to be able to drive all types of vehicles with one hand because the second hand was used to talk via walkie-talkies. There were no cell phones back then. At the moment of the dissolution of the United States, of the USSR, there were representatives that were in the groups of UN observers in the following countries of the Middle East: Egypt, Israel, Syria, border between Iraq and Kuwait, then in the Western Sahara region. In the year 1992, the operations were also started to see participation of our armed forces within the peacekeeping corps, and the United Nations very often heard and continued to hear criticism from all sides. But it seems to me that the only peacekeeping agency of the United Nations was the only one that had no claims against it. It works satisfied both Israel and Syria and the United Nations. In the neighboring Lebanon, a group of military observers now counts approximately 50 unarmed observers. Peacekeepers, Russian observers appeared there only in the early 2000s, way later in Syria and Jerusalem. They include, from what I know, 3 officers, 1 woman among them, and in 2011, when the Syrian conflict started, unfortunately, there were violations of the ceasefire with escalation of military actions in the zone that was patrolled by peacekeepers. It was explained by the difficult situation in the country, presence of various actors and sides of conflict, Syrian conflict. There saw the civil war unraveling and what in the state conflict. It's no secret that there were various arguments on the justifications for the presence of the peacekeeping forces. They accuse the peacekeepers in inefficiency. They say that peacekeeping missions not always are able to make the conflicting sides to hold the ceasefire. Secondly, UN peacekeepers cannot on their own provide neither financial support of the mission nor their physical safety without any guarantees from the conflicting side. Thirdly, the effect of the resolution of the United Nations Security Council in the region is very limited. The majority of resolutions, for example, the resolutions on Arab-Israel and Palestine-Israel conflicts were not fulfilled at all. And fourthly, the long presence of peacekeepers unfortunately didn't help to prevent the Israel's attack on Lebanon, on the sector of Gaza. On Syria, peacekeepers were unable to provide the fulfillment of numerous resolutions of the United Nations Security Council on Israel forces to leave the occupied Palestinian soil after 1967. On the other hand, we need not forget that these were the United Nations peacekeeping forces on Heights that were in 1974. They proved their efficiency up until the moment of the beginning of the civil war in Syria. On the Israel-Syrian border was the calmest one. As a journalist, I had special permission to go out there to go on Heights. I like to go on the historical sites. It was the most peaceful, the most quiet, the most calm place in Syria, and that is the achievement of UN observers. Recent years, the participation of Russian observers in peacekeeping process in the Middle East sees not the best of times. In 2017, Russia was not in the first 10 countries and the number of UN observers, and now I think it has gone even further back. Russian peacekeeping veterans with whom I'm stay in touch told me about the process of self-extension of Russia from providing armed forces to participate in peacekeeping missions. Our United Nations participants regretted on the low presence of Russian military in United Nations organizations. They told me about the lack of Russian veterans in peacekeeping missions of the United Nations, lack of any status, about the low level of prestige of peacekeeping activities among the officers of the Russian armed forces. From my point of view, in our country, unfortunately, not everyone can imagine what is peacekeeping. Our media pays very small attention to this issue. It's laughable, but the peacekeeping definition is not even the Charter of the United Nations, only the idea, efforts of humanity to resolve armed conflicts. And today, all the United Nations missions have altogether 98 Russian peacekeepers, and the overall number of missions in United Nations is 2,303 people, and at the same time, peacekeeping is the most important tool to resolve many of the foreign policy problems that Moscow faces today. Peacekeeping impacts the image of Russia. It allows to take part in the resolution of crisis situations, conflict areas and war zones, and it allows us to increase our influence in the United Nations. If Russia will not send peacekeeping forces and hold key positions in missions of the United Nations, then its authority will significantly diminish. So, however, despite the internal and for external problems, from my point of view, our state has to pay and dedicate more attention to issues of peacekeeping. And it's not only in the interest of the peoples of the Middle East, also in the future of Russia itself. Thank you very much for your attention. I tried to stick to the time frame. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions? Dear colleagues, I would like to make a small comment and then the question to Sergey Leonidovich. I would like, dear colleagues, to pay your attention to two things. First is Shia or Iranian crescent that is written a lot about the presence of Iran in Lebanon, Syria, Bahrain, and Yemen. Second crescent, from my point of view, is the Kuwait crescent, is the presence of Turkey, is the Turkey crescent, sorry, is the presence of Turkey in Libya, Syria, Iraq, in the Caucasus region, in Azerbaijan, in Qatar, and in Somalia. The Southern Caucasus region, Iraq, and Syria is the clash of these two crescents. From my point of view today, we observe the clash of these two crescents in Southern Caucasus and in Syria. Sergey Leonidovich, what do you think, given the conditions in terms of these clashes, given the clashes of these two crescents, what has the position of Russia be like in order to sustain its presence and influence in the Middle East and in the region? Thank you very much. A very interesting question, because indeed, it's on the one hand a very difficult one. On the other hand, you said what has to be the position of Russia. I wouldn't like to be excessively grateful, or in this case, it seems to me that the position of Russia has to be exactly like it is. I'll clarify. I hear it a lot also from our Syrian colleagues that Russia manages I don't want to say balance because it's a very fragile term. Balance, maybe not a very good one. But Russia was able to hold a very firm, sustainable stance between those two Christians. On the one hand, Russia, as you know, has quite good relationships with Turkey and with Erdogan. If we speak about our leaders, despite a series of issues that is present, and sometimes these issues even undertook some crisis forms. Still, these relationships are good. If we speak about the other questions about Iran, then here, well, Iran is a strategic partner in essence, in particular in Syrian issue and send Iranians. We have to say they have provided Russia with the victory on land because Russia, first of all, was waging war with technologies and uh, armed forces in space and air, but on land is where the Iranian battalions, Iranian armed forces, and Hezbollah supported Iranian-backed Hezbollah units that are great fighters. And Russian stance is the golden needle that it has to hold in the future, which will be the foundation for successful development, position and influence in the Middle East. And if we throw out the Arab-Israeli Palestinian Israeli conflict because they're a very different story, but in this sense, I think that we feel ourselves quite comfortable and cozy in these two Christians from my point of view, and we're able to uh, negate these contradictions that exist and to make the work for our interests. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. We move forward in the next speaker, Anna Ganukovna Gevorgyan, assistant head to the Department of International Relationships of the Russian People's Friendship University and the student of our department, Andrukhin. Hello, dear colleagues. Can you hear me? Thank you very much. We are glad to present to you our joint speech and presentation of comparative analysis of the role of Russia and Turkey in the resolution of the Syrian conflict. The role of Russia and its reasons for participation and stabilization of state in the series due to a series of reasons from which we have to outline the strategic importance of the Middle Eastern region for the Russian Federation, fight with terrorism outside Russia, armed opposition in Syria, and armed conflict, as we know, has been going on from 2012. The situation in 2012 was quite difficult and dire for the government of Syria. In the map, we can notice that by 2015, armed forces of Syrian Republic control only 20% of the whole area of the country. It's given on the map in yellow and orange based on the situation. In September 2015, Syrian President Bashar Assad addressed Russian Federation with the request for military support to the government and armed forces. So the operation of Russian Air and Space Forces Syria started. Thanks to the Russian armed forces, Syrian government was able to restore control over the majority of the area of the country and switch to the escalation political resolution of the conflict. The active stage of military operation of the Russian armed forces went on for approximately 5 months and 14 days, starting from September 30th, 2015 up until mid-February 2016, when the negotiations for ceasefire started. The treaty on ceasefire went into effect February 27, 2016. Next year, on December 11, 2017, President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, announced on the resolution of the anti-terrorism operation in Syria and the dislocation of the Russian armed forces group in this country. The Russian armed forces successfully completed its mission, but still remain on Akhmimi military base and in northern Syria, military police carries out monitoring operations on the map. You can, on the slide, you can see numbers and data on the operation of the Russian armed forces in Syria. Next slide tells us about the humanitarian situation in Syria that was during the period of crisis from 2011. According to the data of the United Nations, more than 350,000 people were killed and murdered. Approximately 14 million of Syrian citizens became dislocated, citizens of which there were refugees, and 8 million became internally relocated people. We work to note that this data really changed now. The number of refugees is declining, and due to the data of United Nations in 2021, 36,000 of Syrians came back to Syria. So the resolution of the crisis leads to people returning to their homes. Besides military mechanism of resolving the Syrian crisis, there are also political measures that are taken. Moscow today plays a very important role in political resolution of the Syrian conflict. It has its own representation and idea of the alternative options to resolve a series of international issues, and takes in Syrian conflict a firm stance on protecting the territorial sovereignty of Syrian Republic. Moscow initiated the creation of a triple initiative, which countries Syria, which are Russia, represented by Russia, Iran, and Turkey, and also establishing the platform for negotiation in Astana, goes parallel to the existing Geneva process. Negotiations in the Astana format are held in 2017, and in January 2018 in Sochi there was a Congress of Syrian National Dialogue that became the first from the moment of the conflict, first attempt to gather on a single platform a wide array of participants, so to include representatives of opposition and governments. The results of this conflict are the decision to create a constitution committee that continues to operate up to this moment, and this committee operates on the Geneva platform, and in 2022 in summer, the ninth meeting was planned but did not take place due to the international situation. In Sochi, the resolution, the most important issues have been confirmed that interest both Syrian opposition, especially also the Syrian government. First is the protection of sovereignty and independence, territorial sovereignty, and unity of the Syrian Arab Republic. The necessity to define the future of Syria by the Syrian people through democratic elections without any external foreign pressure or meddling according to international law and the requirements of Syria. The willingness to build Syria as a democratic and non-faction, non-law state. And the last point is the active fight with terrorism, extremism, religious fanatism, interconfessional conflicts in all its expressions. We see that at the current moment, under the lead of Russia, there's also a center for peace of side of the conflict and monitoring on relocated citizens that operates on the territory of the Syrian Arab Republic. Every day, center conducts briefing on its work aimed at non-military resolution of the conflict and providing full support to Syrian citizens in restoring normal peaceful life. Center also publishes data on humanitarian work done. Altogether, from the beginning of the process of operation of center, 3,250 humanitarian events were held. We still have +1 as of today. The overall weight of humanitarian aid amounted to almost 6,000 tons, 5.9 thousand tons. Also, the memorandum continued to be followed of the Russian-Turkey memorandum on understanding that entered the force of 22 September 19. My colleague will tell about it later in more detail. Also, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation publishes information bulletins on the fulfillment of the memorandum of creating zones of de-escalation, and we can see in one example of such zone has been created, and it's been done every 2 days, and this has been in Syria, and it states the majority of creating of de-escalation zones. Also, we state that humanitarian state and roads that are in, we can see everything on the map. Also, it's very interesting, and on this maps we show the influence zones. No, we can see the north, which has Turkish and Kurd impact, southwestern, which has other influences. We'll tell about this in later detail on following slides. And we can see that moving to conclusions, I would like to note that Russian conclusions from the very beginning, it's expressed in clear form. We can see direct negotiations between sides of conflict and international meddling of the regime. The position of Russia in Syrian crisis was quite defined in the work of the United Nations organizations within the framework of the United Nations Security Council. Moscow has been vouching for first polycentric world view and achieving safety and security for all countries, given the respect of sovereignty and rights of people to self-identify, then for creating a wide anti-terrorist front with the participation of all the countries in the peace process and the agreement of states on the territories of which ongoing fight of terrorism is being conducted, with the central role of United Nations and sticking to principles and norms of international law. Then I give the word, dear colleagues, to Timur Vladimirovich, my colleague, on the role of Turkey. Timur, please. Can you hear me? Yes, please. I'll speak from my phone. I have some problems with speakers on my laptop, so excuse me for that. My short speech on the role of Turkey in resolving Syrian conflict. I would like to make a short note. As we all know, crisis in Syria started in 2011, especially rapidly started to develop in the end of 2012, and we need to see that Turkey initially tried to find some golden middle in this conflict. Turkey tried to convince the government of Bashar Assad to reach compromise with the protesters, but after the said events that took place in Hama in 2011, Turkey took a strongly opposing position to the official government in Damascus, started to actively support the rebels. We can have the next slide. And we can say that Turkey took part in Syrian conflict not through its own and not with its own hands, under the guidance of Turkey through a series of terrorist and opposition armed groups. The Free Syrian Army, the headquarters of which was in the territory of Syria, in the southern province of Turkey. Sorry, this Free National Army that was created later in 2017, but still that acted as a proxy for Turkey Republic in Syria. This is widely known terrorist organization such as Jabhat al-Nusra, the movement of Nuruddin Zengi, Ahrar al-Sham, Livat Tawhid, and others. Of course, all those groups, well, at least partially, are followers of fundamentalist views and are directly related to the Brotherhood of Muslims organization that is outlawed in our country. One of the biggest tasks and goals of Turkey in this conflict is not to allow the appearance of the creation of Kurdish autonomy on the northwest of the Republic. I think this map, the Kurdish Rojava administration, the Kurdish autonomy that spread from Afrin, Canton up until Hasaki and Kemislo at the east of the country. We will mention it further on, that when we take a look at the more modern stage, close to our time, Turkey held a series of operations aimed mostly against Kurdish militia and the armed forces. And I would like to separately touch on this 1 minute. You have 1 minute left. Okay, I'll try to be brief. Then we can move on to then. We don't have much time left. We can jump over several slides up until the last one. I just wanted to touch on the topic of the shadow connections of Turkey with the Islamic State, on how Turkey supported ISIL in their fight against the Kurds, on how Turkey traded with the Islamic State of Iraq and Levant and in its oil trade. The struggle with the Kurdish movement led Turkey to hold several major operations on the north of Syria. And this is Shitbat and Falkana, Zitin, Dali, the olive branch. And then finally, the last big operation. Can we have the next slide, please? This is the source of peace, after which Russia and Turkey created the bilateral agreement establishing the 3-kilometer buffer zone on the north of Syria, patrolled by joint forces of Russia and Turkey. Thank you very much. Your time is over. Thank you very much for your presentation speech. Dear colleagues, do you have any questions? I can see Abdul Rahman, Abdul Salam, you have your questions.
Just want to tell Mr. Hassanan something. Hello, Mr. Hassanan. Do you hear me?
Да, вас слышно.
Mr. Hassanan, do you hear
Yes,
me?
господин,
I think that Mr. Hussain is not with us. He is not around, you see. So it's better to text him.
Yeah, I sent him a message. I just wanted to tell
Yes,
him.
just please send him a message, okay? Send him a message and I hope that he will respond you.
Okay,
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Хорошо, хорошо, идем дальше. У нас
okay, very well. We move on. We have the last speaker, Mahmoudova Maria Igorevna. She is a candidate in history and expert of the Russian Institute for Strategic Research. Please, Maria Igorevna, you have the floor. She might not be with us today.
Да, видно, ее нет. Уважаемые коллеги,
Dear colleagues, unfortunately, she was unable to connect. She has some problems with the internet. Can you hear me?
Хорошо слышно.
Mr. Dekterev, yes, I can hear you loud and clear. Okay, so let's then have a series of closing comments. Denis Andreevich, please. Dear colleagues, I have been listening to all the speeches with great attention in the first and second part. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I have the idea and the feeling that, of course, what we lack, there is a vacuum of this regional power, not the Western power, but something that would structure like the United Nations. But the United Nations are not doing their job. They're not serious regional organizations there. And this vacuum forces the experienced colleagues from, Aaron spoke about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, but it's not in the region yet there. So up until the, so there's a feeling of vacuum that will structure the regional power in the region. And it seems to me that it's a very special kind of a problematic. Maybe Svetlana Alexandrovna might correct me, or some other speakers would correct me.
Вас не слышно, Светлана
Can't hear
Александровна.
you, Svetlana Alexandrovna.
Я согласна, Денис Андреевич.
I quite
Согласна
agree
вот с вашим мнением в
with
отношении
your
того, что,
opinion,
конечно,
Denis,
международные институты в рамках
regarding the fact that the international institutions
региональных организаций,
within the framework of regional organizations and universal organizations are engaged uh, not quite an effective way and practically non-efficient. But nonetheless, we've heard presentations that spoke of them being used as channels for interaction between the conflict parties, and that's already an achievement. And also, of course, we would want to thank for all of the wonderful presentations, for all of this organizational works done by the organizational committee members. And the course of discussion has confirmed the fruitfulness of this interactions between scholars, practitioners, and experts. And I'm quite certain. I'm sorry, I was
Maria.
connection. I was great. Maria is with us. Okay.
Я хотела еще вот
I
завершить.
just wanted to draw the line, just literally one more second. I'd also like to thank everyone who has made a contribution to the preparation, has spent their time. It's very valuable, just so we can meet and discuss all these issues. Thank you so much. Maria Igorevna, can you hear us? Yes, I can hear you. Can you share my presentation and send it to you? Yes, I'll ask you to kindly stick to our schedule, to our timing. Thank you so much. Can you move on to the next slide right away? So my presentation will have to do with the Libyan issue and its how it can be handled, issues of its of how it can be handled. So I'll start with a brief history. In 2011, Libya faced civil war. Gaddafi regime is taken down. City-states are formed. At the same time, a UN mission is formed. Is approved by the key UN state members, and I think there's been more than 5 representatives, 5 heads, and not one of them was able to propose a perfect formula for a regulation of this conflict. So in 2011, as we all know, the power transitions to the nationals, traditional national council. Unfortunately, this interim body was not able to unite the country and propose new constitution and new roles for parliamentary and presidential elections. And this problem persists. In 2012, the powers passed to the National Congress, elected body, and in 2014, new elections are called for the parliament. So we have an issue here because the parliament, when it was elected, in the process of voting, there were very few participants. So there is a question of whether the election is legitimate. But on the other hand, there was a problem there because the parliament included mostly secular forces that, if we just look at things honestly, there was a conflict there, and the parliament is still functioning, even though there's been some time since 2014 in the West. In Tripoli, a new national Congress is created, where the key power and the key positions were taken by representatives of Muslim brotherhoods, and soon the representatives also penetrate all of the state structures and they control the oil flow, the central bank, and it's also one of the key issues of Libya at the moment. Next slide, please. So, so the next international players are already starting to become more active when it comes to Libyan regulation, conflict regulation, because it had to do with presidential and parliament elections. Everything fails. The democratic process does not stick in here. So it's the Rome Conference sets way for the creation of the national unity government that actually that was curated by the UN. So it was all created in Morocco, as we know. And the key question here is that the Libyan mission, of course, want to make things for the better, but it turned out the way it always does. So the head of the government is a person that is closely linked with a Muslim Brotherhood. He rapidly moves to Tripoli, and very soon all of the oil flow and all the financial flow is controlled by a narrow circle of persons. So Italians. They have most of all contacts in the French. Are more interested in the East and have an alliance with the head of the national army. I didn't hear the name. So we can state that the UN Libyan aid issue failed because the national unity government was created only within the framework of one capital that in fact did not control even the whole city, because the city is separated between various armed groups. And other than that, such cities as Misrata, Sib live their complete separate life. And then the international players conduct a few international conferences, and the most different one took place in Paris. It has nothing to do with Libyan aid mission. It was a personal initiative by Macron. Was geared towards east and west. So the key question discussed there was France having a roadmap for these two parties, and they were supposed to conduct presidential parliament elections and unite their state institutions, but still and somehow foster unity in Syria. But that did not happen, and soon Rome attempts to restore its positions, competing with France for Libyan oil, and calls a conference in Palermo. Of course, Palermo, it was a funny story because Khalifa Haftar first decided not to come, and then he decided to, and then he finally came. The Palermo conference just turned out to be another meeting without any results. But the most significant things happens closed conference or closed roundtable between the conflict parties in the Emirates. And there, according to the number of witness accounts, an agreement was made that the two parties unite. They conduct the next conference in Damascus, Libyan city, and the Libyan conflict was about to solve. And that the conference, Jan Halama had a lot of faith in this conference. But unexpectedly, civil war starts in 2019, where Haftar takes his forces to Tripoli, and from then on, a fight for the capital starts, and that's when the Muslim Brotherhood managed to create contacts with Turks, and in exchange for the agreement on the naval border, they received Turkish armed forces, and also allowed Turkish military to create their military bases on their territory. That led to the country practically is broken down along the Sergic line. The line has been established in 2020 and is still active. Next slide, please. It's also important to note that as a civil war took place in Libya, a number of international players tried to decrease tension and somehow achieve peace between the east and west of the country. First, the conference now takes place in Moscow, and as we know, Qatar At that moment, he acted strange. Of course, naturally, he thought that the victory will be his until the Turkish armed forces were involved, and he just leaves Moscow triumphant. Then a Berlin conference takes place, and it's even though it takes place with the presence of key players in Berlin, they lived in hotels, but then they didn't attend the final meeting. When Berlin, together with Libyan UN mission, established a roadmap to conflict regulation. I also emphasize one thing that with the creation of Crimea and with the Paris conference, all of the roadmaps start repeating themselves. Terminology may change, but they're all redundant. It's also important to note here that Berlin has developed a roadmap. It's called Dialogue 5+5. That's used by the UN now. It features a number of conferences on the economy, armed force, and so forth. What does 5+5 means? 5 representatives from West and 5 representatives from the East meet on global platforms in different towns. Now it's mostly Egypt and Morocco, and they conduct negotiations there on how they should resolve the conflict. Actually, the process is going on for quite a while, since 2020, and has brought no results so far. In 2021, with the help of the UN Libyan aid mission, a new interim government is created with the completion of the civil war. National unity government headed by, I didn't hear the name. What's interesting about this mission is actually a situation took place where, due to the civil war in Libya, head of the mission couldn't take it, left his position, and at his place was taken by American Stephanie Willis. And actually, she's serves as a representative. It was an attempt to start negotiations, but another person refused this position. And at this moment, there's a heated discussion between the US and Russia, and a number of Arab countries that propose their own representatives to appoint someone on this position. The US, for a long time, refused to accept any position because of support for them to keep Stephanie Williams in this position. And many people think that under the management of Stephanie Williams, the organization serves the American interests. In fact, she created practically a new government where the positions were redistributed on the regional principles. Actually, it would be interesting if they would take it a step further and would redistribute the ministry positions, not based by regions, but by clans. And then the situation maybe would be more interesting. So what happens there? The national unity government was obliged by the end of 21 to conduct presidential elections and presidential and parliamentary elections. It was not done. More so when demands were made to the new owner, head of state, the new head of state, all of the players started changing their mind. Actors suddenly, actors says he's no longer military because military men cannot take place in elections. And the national unity head of the national unity government is also not eligible, but he still oversees candidacy. So no elections take place. And then another question: how can these elections be organized, where every city is up to itself? And all the ports are separated between our different armed forces. So an interesting conspiracy takes. Field Marshal was Akhtar, was Bashad. He was internal affairs minister with the national unity that fought against Akhtar. He's considered to be a conduct for the Turkish forces in Libya. So they're direct enemies. They create a new alliance against the national unity government. They create try to create a coup. It's all worth noting that Turkey took some distance from this process and it not made no comments, despite the fact that its military bases are in Libya now. So the coup fails, and Bashar at the moment in fact, and the other is in Tripoli. So I'd like to note points. We have 1 minute. Maria Igorevna. So key reasons for conflict. 2011, quite some time passed, and all of the tribes and cities have a tendency for self-management. All of the peaceful initiatives came from without, and were not developed inside. There is no internal drive for compromise between the players, and there is a tendency to resolve questions with the use of power. And also, all of the military and political unions are unstable. Next slide, please. So I'd like to ask a question: how can we get out of this dead end? On one hand, we can look at the power solution, but then what is the question? What's the price of victory? And of course, since we're talking about casualties, repressions, and repressions of the Islamists, and so the fact that the Libyan National Army will be able to take Tripoli again. Before to speak of the possible breakdown of the country, there's a question of infrastructure, because over the Gaddafi rule of the country, the infrastructure became united. And there's still a tribal issue there, because there are big tribes in Libya and their representatives live in different cities. And the third option is a compromise. But compromise is always a complex dialogue, and so far we don't see a desire of all the players to resolve the issue. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer all of your questions. Thank you so much, Maria Igorevna, for your word of introduction, for your speech. Once again, I'd like to thank Denis Andreevich. Do you have any questions, dear colleagues?
Вопрос один.
There's only one question.
Сейчас я
Just give me a second.
выключу. Кто, как бы, наверное, на ваш взгляд, из, может быть, из международных организаций, да, из региональных, да, вот, бы, наверное, наиболее эффективно повлиять на процесс в Сирии, да, на урегулирование, да, в Ливии, урегулирование ливийского.
Well, I can't speak of any particular power, because first of all, we should remember that Libyans internally, Libyans are very proud of these tribal people, and people that other people will not agree with the external player. Maybe it's international organizations. Look, even if you look at organizational international organizations, Libyan Aid, UN Libyan Aid, trying to develop roadmaps for a long time and it's not working. Other than that, Libyans are always skeptical towards UN missions. I don't think that it really can have any influence. So, you know, when Stephanie Williams created a national unity government and how she created it, a lot of Libyans were quite unhappy, and they didn't understand why they weren't involved in this process. They were to speak of specific players. I would rather speak of coalitions that are capable, that could possibly agree and indirectly affect the internal players. But so it's worth remembering that everyone has their interests, fears, the spread of Islamism. So if we were to say, like what's happening with Emirates, Emirates managed to arrange a close meeting between Qatar and Sarraj in 2019, but soon it led to a civil war. So we can say that not long before the civil war, there were internal negotiations between Qatar and Egypt, and Emirates, Qatar, and considering with all the military shipments that took place. So to say that one player can have the situation now, maybe some coalitions can agree, but I doubt that. Okay, thank you so much, dear colleagues. So if there are no further questions, I'd like to once again pass the floor to Denis Andreevich for a few final words of comment. Okay, if you have no further comments, in this case, I'd like to thank all the participants for a very interesting discussion. We're very happy to see you all at our event, and we hope for continued cooperation in the future. Thank you. All the best. Thank you. Goodbye. All the best. Bye. Thank you.